What is going on? I want to welcome you from half court for today, Wednesday, August 2nd, 2023, the peak time of the NBA season. I am one of your hosts, Sean Murphy, alongside my guy, Jeff Iafrady. Jeff, when I say the peak of NBA season, it means it is the absolute pits dead time of the NBA season. I miss basketball. How are you?
I'm hanging in there. Luckily, at least for this week, when as we're recording this, we'll never have another week without an NFL game until February. So hopefully we kind of get into that, range for the NBA where if we can just get there, get close, I'll be all right. But we're inching our way there. It's already August. So time's flying, to be honest with you.
Well, it's crazy, Jeff, because, it's like back in the day, I remember like thinking like, oh man, NFL preseason's coming around, but it's like, it's not the same. Like I don't even know if I'm going to watch. Now it's like, oh, thank God we have preseason football on Thursday. Thank goodness I get to see, we get to see the starters for like 2 snaps, but thank goodness there's just something that isn't baseball.
Yeah, that's how I felt when that Cade footage came out, of him hooping. I just watched that and just digested that, and it got me through a couple days. So, that's what I live by in the summer, those runs.
Yeah, for sure, 100%. Also joining us is the man himself, the Marquette Heat, the man, the myth, the legend, Sergey. Hey, Troy, how's it going?
Going good, Sean. And Jeff brought up the NFL around the corner, and your shirt reminded me of college football. That's going to be a fun season. I'm, of course, a Spartan fan, so I'm not totally on board with that shirt, but it's going to be a fun season, and I know you guys are probably going to beat us. But, hey, got tickets tomorrow night for Indiana Fever and Phoenix Mercury.
Hey!
Diana Taurasi. Brittany Griner won't be playing, but it'll be a good little thing for my birthday, so it'll be a fun night of basketball.
That's awesome, man. So like as of recording tomorrow night?
Yeah.
Okay, that's awesome. So when this podcast is out, you will have already been there.
Yes.
I expect to see comments right now.
Yes. WNBA comments. What can I expect from
like I better see this live chat going crazy right now. Anyway,
we're coming out with a quiz next pod on that game. So
don't worry. Yeah, like you it is not open note. You will, we will make sure that we know if you're cheating or not. Anyway, I digress. This is From Half Court. Reach it every week. We come here to talk all things NBA basketball, Detroit basketball. Even when there's not basketball being played, that doesn't mean there's nothing to be said. If you'd like that, be sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of the content coming from the channel. But also, be sure you follow my guys on social media. My boy Jeff at Jeff Iafrady on Twitter or X or whatever it's called now, as well as, by the way, now that they're like almost like looking the exact same, like I'm just waiting for more people to go over to Threads so we could just kick Twitter to the curb. I just feel like it's not going to happen.
Hey, if you look at the search bar on X or Twitter, it still says search Twitter. So that's one thing that's still there.
That's something, I guess, that we can hold on to. But guys, speaking of something that was almost as depressing as seeing Twitter be rebranded to X, the Detroit Pistons in a latest power ranking by ESPN.com, they did their first NBA power rankings after the off-season festivities. And what would you know? The Detroit Pistons are currently ranked 30th, aka dead last in their ranking, behind teams like the Washington Wizards, the Portland Trailblazers, the Charlotte Hornets. I personally would not rank them 30th. However, guys, I would propose that this is not much of a surprise, seeing that these rankings are largely based off of last year's records. And even though there were changes made this offseason and they're going to bring them up, I don't think that changes very much. Like I would guarantee you guys, and I'd love to know your guys' thoughts. If you were to take the power ranking and put them next to the actual ranking from last season, I would guarantee you it's almost identical.
Yeah. especially this early before the season too. Like
right.
it's like and this is why, especially right now as a Pistons fan, just don't look at any of these power rankings. Just stay off of them for another year probably, because you're going to be at bottom of that list. Now during the season, it's fun to look at them, but before the season, you're absolutely right, Sean.
Right. And to your point, Sean, I think we didn't really land that massive free agent that I think would have put us up. We're still that quote unquote 17-win team plus a healthy Cade, plus an Asar Thompson, plus some other guys. But at the end of the day, we're still roster wise not massively better. But a healthy Cade, as we Pistons fans know, will of course make us better. But I still want to know what what Washington has that we don't have, because I think if anything, we should be 29 and the Wizards should be 30.
I think again, and I think there's many reasons why. Like if you just quickly dissect this power rank, you can go, oh, well, that's not right. That's not right. But again, a lot of it's just conjecture and guessing on what these teams are going to be. And when you see a team that only won 17 games, naturally, when their only off-season additions are Joe Harris, Monty Morris, Asar Thompson, and Monty Williams, as much as we love Monty, he's not a guy that can play on the court. He's not a wing that can stretch the floor. So, like the reality of it is, like, this team is still going to be young. It's still going to lose a lot of games and make mistakes. But at the same time, I think if you look at the trajectory of what they did when Cade was healthy to end his rookie season, coupled with the talent that they actually added last offseason, I mean, guys, like, I don't we've brought it up in this podcast before. The talent of last year's roster was not a 17-win team. If all the pieces were together, this team was better than 17 wins. Is it a play-in team? No. Is it anything more than like 26, 27 wins last year? Probably not. But I don't think it's unrealistic for this team to take a 16-win jump in a season. Like, I know that might sound crazy, but like, with the new coaching staff and the support and the system that they're going to be bringing in, with a healthy, stable, consistent Cade Cunningham, Lord willing, the potential of what a year two Jaden Ivey can be, which we'll get to in a minute. I think there's a lot of reasons like why this team, like, especially, we talk about how this season could very much be like a Tyrese Halliburton type breakout year for Cade. Mm-hmm. I think they could have a very similar season to what the Pacers did last year, where, if you guys remember, we all thought the Pacers were going to be a Victor Wembanyama sweepstake team. They were projected to be a bottom 3 team in the NBA. And then all of a sudden, the third through the season, they're what, a 4th or 5th seed in the East?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the reality, I'm not saying they're going to have that type of jump, but at the very least, I think they could look, like last year's Pacers, or even like an Eastern Conference equivalent of last year's Thunder, where they're right on the verge of getting to the play-in, or right on the verge of getting to the playoffs. And in a couple of years that they're going to be a threat.
Yeah, you expect him, especially for a young team. You expect him to be that team that, teams typically aren't terrified to play, but at the same time, you don't like to play the Pistons because of how scrappy they are, and how, with all the youth they have, those guys are going to be flying around. Now, projecting young players to take a next step is hard, because if you come up with these power rankings, no one knows the type of jump Jaden Ivey is going to take. No one knows how much better Jalen Duren's going to get. We assume, and obviously if anyone would know, at least for our fan base, it's us. So this is what we talk about. But for nationally and ESPN, they can't predict that. Cade coming back. Now how great he looks in the summer, but especially with his weight now, him hopefully being healthy for an entire season, but his shot, everything kind of coming together for Cade. You can't really measure that. Like, there's so many things. That's why when you say things like that, Sean, 16-win jump, like, I don't think that's crazy. Like, what did Monte, when he first came to Phoenix, what did they go from 19 wins to like 34, 35 wins, something like that? I can see that, because even with the win total last year, 17 games, there was no team in the NBA that had players miss more games collectively than the Pistons. So they don't have that in the article as well. So I do think the Pistons can be one of those teams that go from, there's context needs to be had, but from a 17-win team to 34 35-win team. Like I could see that happening because, again, you can't really measure the effect Monty's going to have. And some, like me, think it'll be bigger than most people think. I think he can almost double this win total. I really do believe that with healthy Cade and even the pieces they've added. Although it's not marquee names, like if Joe Harris can see playing time, that's a guy who can shoot the hell out of the ball. Monty Morris will be a great backup guard. So I like this team moving forward. I think they can certainly double their wins next season. Now, it really depends on health, which a lot of teams are in the same boat as that. So we'll see. But I got confidence in it.
Right. I mean, Troy, I think the real like X factor on like how far this team can actually go this season, as far as like can they make a play-in game or not, I think that's ultimately going to come down to the readiness of guys like Asar Thompson, even guys like Isaiah Livers. Like I know we talk a lot about, like Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, and yes, like this whole thing goes where Cade takes us, but at the same time, when you're essentially asking, Asar Thompson to be one of your best defensive players day one, Isaiah Livers is going to be a guy that they're going to be relying on pretty heavily as well. Like you look at like the rotation of wings that they have guys that can space the floor. They have guys, that can put the ball through the net. But like, can guys like Isaiah Livers and Asar Thompson stretch the floor, get enough playing time, but at the same time, can they be enough of catalysts on the defensive end to make that change and to push this team up a different level? Because again, I think, on the offensive end, I don't have a lot of concerns offensively with this team. It's going to be how do they take that next level on the defensive end of the court?
Right, and I'm glad you brought up the defensive end, because I think when you look at a guy like Asar Thompson, as far as how he can contribute to this team day one, and then you try to translate that to wins, and you guys both mentioned, the possibility of close to doubling their wins if it's 15 or 16 or maybe even 17 extra wins from the 17 games that they won this year. That's only possible if they can be scrappy, right? And it's only possible if on the defensive end, similar plays or sequences of events last year where maybe they got burnt on a play or two, where they let up a three-pointer when they shouldn't have, and if they can get a stop when last year they had a three-pointer, you know what I mean? Like you have to look at games last year of maybe that were in reach that the Pistons could have gotten, and then translate it to this year with this year's roster and say, okay, if this goes right for us with an Asar Thompson defensive play, a Cade Cunningham, to the rim, outlet kick to Ivy for three that we didn't see last year. Those are the types of plays that we can imagine in our head and say, okay, those 2 or 3 plays that they didn't do last year, they do it this year, that's a win. And if they do that 16 times in games that they easily got burnt and could have done better, that's a win. And
even then too, Troy, like just the fact, like not to cut you off, I'm sorry. But you look at how many games that were not even competitions last year. How many games were blowouts? How many games we went in and they were just so handicapped from a roster standpoint where it was like, all right, well, can we at least keep it within single digits? You know what I mean? Like, I think I think this team is just going, like, just the fact that they're going to be staying in games way more often, that in itself is going to get you more wins. That in itself is going to get you, because like a lot of the times the Pistons couldn't close the deal because they weren't in that situation often. And so when they were, they had no idea what they were doing.
Right. But you think of that game last year, what were they up 11 with 45 seconds to go against the Clippers? Remember that? I mean, those are plays. Those are games where you just got to execute right? I mean, not many teams lose games like that, but hey, that's what last year was for, and hopefully we can at least make some improvements this year.
And am I crazy to say this too? Because this is what I believe, at least. I know when people bring up the defense, I don't think this team, and I might be crazy to be honest with you, I don't think this team is, for at least if you're talking defensively, is really like missing much. Like I think the potential's there is what I'm saying. I mean, if you got Ivy, Cade, who Ivy defensively, those numbers to me are a little skewed because of how much offensively was put on his plate. I think he could, I mean, clearly with his length and size and athleticism, he could be a much better defender. Cade, we know he is already a solid above average defender. You have Asar now, which boosts this thing, especially on the perimeter. Isaiah Stewart, the menace he is, but also going out to the perimeter. Duran, Livers, Killian. like, even if you have a Joe Harris, he can be hidden, is what I'm saying. There's guys like you can throw an Asar on an opposing, the best perimeter player offensively for an opposing team. Like, I like what they have. It's more about, to me at least, X's and O's. The coach, from a coaching standpoint, I think Monty will fix a lot of that, but we shall see. Maybe I'm an idiot.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's a lot of reason to like this team defensively because you look at the talent, you look on paper, like they have all the reason to be a top 5, top 10 defensive team for years to come with the size they have in the backcourt, with the players that they added in the front court and the athleticism that this team has. Like we've seen the physical gifts in the ways that Jalen Duren can dominate the game. If he can take those and apply them on the defensive end on a consistent basis, I mean, guys, he already looks like a framework of Bam Adebayo. Just throw that in there. I mean, like he is not far off. Like that ceiling for him is not insane.
No, so, not even close.
Yeah. So like, you look at what this team, like how they're going to be defensively, and I know we talked about, like Asar, and Isaiah Livers, and like those guys are going to have, like super important roles because they are going to have to guard some of the best players in the wing. But ultimately, you need that guy on the back line that if there is failure, like if guys do get through, if there are guys that get openings, like the most important thing, especially like on the defensive end is a solid anchor, someone that you can fall back on, someone who can protect the rim, someone that, like brings intimidation when they're going into the basket. If anything, last year it was how can we get to the basket and how can we try to get, fouls on Duren? How can we get to the basket and get attacks on guys like Marvin Bagley? So, like if Detroit can shore up a lot of their issues in the paint, and, I think defensively that's going to open up so many things for them.
And speaking of defense, and speaking of the size this Pistons team have, especially coming off the bench with Wiseman, when does Bagley get traded? Like what's the timeline looking for that? Because there's kind of a log jam, I guess, if you talk about the second unit.
I still think, to be honest, this is a bold statement, but before the season, but I wouldn't be. There's no way past the deadline, in my opinion. But I'm going to make the bold prediction and say before opening night.
Yeah, I mean, as you're looking at the roster and you're trying to make sense of the pieces they have and what they're going to be going forward, I certainly think like at least by the deadline, I think it's hard to see Marvin Bagley being in Detroit super long term, especially with the injury issues he's had, with his lack of consistency, being able to stay on the court. And I mean, quite frankly, James Wiseman can kind of do a lot of things comparably to Marvin Bagley, and you have him on a cheaper deal. And so, like, you look at the reality of things, I definitely think Marvin Bagley getting traded before the season starts is not, like unforeseen. It's not crazy, but like, again, it's just, the deal has to make sense. Right. And so I think, I certainly think, we could see some form of combination of Bagley and Killian being packaged and being moved at some point before the season. I think one thing I feel pretty comfortable about, if Detroit goes and makes like major moves this season, I don't think they're going to go trade for like a major star or like a major player this year. Like, I think you could see them like start to push in their chips like over the next couple of seasons. But I think as of this year, it is really much just like honing down and really figuring out what are the core pieces we are actually building around, because you feel like, but with the time you lost last season, you have to make sure
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Especially now. I mean, it's crazy to think it's the first season that you'll have for a full season, hopefully, Ivy, Cade, and Duren, or at least the three we know. Now, Asar can fit in that, but so yes, I agree with that statement. I know people are excited, but that's also part of it for me. It's just a big, it was supposed to be last year, the evaluation stuff, which, we got to see some of it, but the complete evaluation, the backcourt, all that stuff. Yeah, it's this season. It is.
Yeah. Speaking of the evaluation, speaking of taking the next steps, I brought up his name a second ago, Jaden Ivey. Obviously at Summer League, of all the second players, he probably wasn't the one that had the flashiest of Summer League and flashiest of improvements. I mean, you look at a guy like Jabari Smith Jr., who scored 38 points, and, you're blown away by that. But, at the same time, you look at what Jaden Ivey actually did do, and there were some solid, there were some solid assist numbers. There was some really good defensive plays and some really good, moments on that side of the ball. Jaden Ivey's going to be 22 at some point this season. He's, going to finally be able to play alongside Cade. What's a successful second season for a guy like Jaden Ivey?
Are you saying stat wise? Is that
not necessarily stat wise? I mean, we can talk about like what improvements we'd like to see on that end, but like if you were to define what a successful second season is for Jaden Ivey as far as development and growth that you can see on the court, like what is a successful season? Because to me, I think when you look at the growth he can take, I mean, there's already so many things that this guy does well and so many things he already has in his game. For me, can he get the three? Can he continue to shoot the three consistently? And can he continue to get better on defense? Because if this guy, because, he talked about how last year he felt like he was losing games for us because of his defense. If he can get to a point where not only is he not losing us games, but in fact is like making impact plays on that end, it's only going to make his athleticism even more of an explosive weapon. It's only going to make him even more dangerous to have on the court.
And I think, the 3-point percentage, I think, was something I was going to say, and you nailed it. And not just defense, but steals. I think if that guy can be swipey on the defensive end and get some steals and transition buckets, or even passing up to a teammate and getting an assist that way after a steal, I think just those quick buckets after a solid defensive end is going to be something that I think he's so quick anyways that I feel like doing that on a consistent basis and having the energy of the team, the energy of the bench, energy of the LCA going will be great. So,
am I crazy to say with his length and athleticism that he could also get a lot of blocks for a guard as well?
Oh, yeah.
Like he's a guy that can like get a lot of a lot of trailing blocks, a lot of stuff at the basket. There's so much when you look at Jaden Ivey, like there's a reason why they challenged him to be like one of the best on the defensive court, because he has everything you need to be awesome on that side of the court. It's just,
he certainly has all the physical tools. Like physically, the man, like there's nothing there. I mean, he's in shape. He's 6'4". He's got the wingspan. He's got the athleticism. Like he's got all that. Now, for me, on top of what you said, Sean, which is true, his 3-point shot, which he showed more so the second half of last season, and just in general, the improvement. He hit like for a stretch of games, he was hitting like four threes a game. Like the guy was, he looked great, better than I expected. The big one for me is making your teammates better. Because that's the thing with Ivey's game and his decision-making. That's something you're watching. But now with more talent, are you getting in Cade's way? Like, that's the number one thing. Like, can you and Cade play with each other? But number one, can you learn to play the Robin to Cade's Batman? Not saying it's any, shot on what Jaden is, but that's essentially what it is when it comes down to how far this team goes is essentially on Cade and Jaden. But as long as you get to see Ivey not get in the way of Cade and everybody else is playing well around Ivey, because again, his game with his athleticism, there's times where it's almost like he makes the decision while he's in the air. Like he didn't think about what he was going to do before he did it. So that stuff, the game slowing down for him is a big one. And if him and Cade can play together, to me, that's a success. Both of those guys having success with each other. Like that, just statistically, from a statistical standpoint, that's one of the most important things to me, because your franchise is essentially based around those two guys. So they got to be able to play together.
Yeah, and I mean, Troy, we saw a lot of those flashes as well from like towards the end of the season. Like we saw those moments where it became easy for Jaden Ivey. Like there were passes, there were moments, there were things that he was doing, like with his body, with his vision, with his IQ, that was setting up his teammates to be better. I think. I think he has the luxury of having Cade back, so he won't have to shoulder as much of that burden. But at the same time, I think, can he keep up that volume of scoring, but improve that efficiency to where we're not having as many, as many lost possessions, right? Like, for example, like his effective field goal percentage last season is 47%. You do not want your effective field goal percentage to be anywhere under 50%. Like you want to be hovering around 60. realistically. So, like I think you look at the, different areas that he can improve. I definitely think his like selection, like his shot selection at the rim. I think quite frankly, you want to see a guy who's not making the same mistakes he was as a rookie. And you want to see a guy who is showing the development in the areas that he needed to improve on when he comes into the league.
Right.
And I don't think Jaden Ivey's going to take a significant step back, because I think he's a guy who's so hell-bent and focused on being a great NBA player that, like, I don't think he's going to, because I think a lot of that comes from, like, guys not putting in the work or guys not being in the gym. I don't think that's a problem with Jaden Ivey.
Right. Yeah. And to your first point, the luxury of an 82-game season is, especially as a rookie, you can see the progress from game 1 to game 82. And we certainly saw that with Ivey and how he was playing.
Yeah.
Certainly that was last even 10 games, just awesome basketball. So I think that should be one thing that comforts us Pistons fans, of knowing where he got to. And of course, you mentioned that work ethic. That's something that we can certainly hang our hat on that and know for sure as a Pistons fan that he is certainly in the gym this summer. He's getting shots up, he's getting reps in the weight room, and all that comes in with the offseason. So I do think with all of that, I'm not worried about Ivey. I feel like too with Imani Williams, that will be a good fit for a guy like Ivey as far as development goes. And even in Dwayne Casey still in the front office, I think having his voice still in his corner, but not being that the main voice, is going to be good. So I feel like out of all the Pistons concerns, Ivey wouldn't even crack my top 10.
Well, even having a guy like Jarrett Jack on your
right.
sideline, like such a small, like smart, solid point guard. Even guys like Monty Morris, who's going to be able to come on the court, and like I feel like he's going to actually be able to both mentor him on and off the court. As much as we love guys like Rodney Magruder, like Monty Morris and Joe Harris are the type of vets that we talked about, where they need guys who can come on the court, have tangible success. Like, these aren't guys who are superstars. These aren't guys who are all-stars. But Monty Morris might be one of the best backup point guards in basketball.
Oh yeah.
Like, he's a superstar in his role. And we talk about the importance of having those types of guys. Like, the fact that you are going to have a Joe Harris that you can rely on to like space the floor and give you that much more dangerous shooting. The fact that you have, like guys like Bojan and Alec Burks who can get you a bucket just on command, seemingly, right? Like, I just think the amount of pieces they have together. And to your point, Troy, like, just like with, some of the things he showed that he can already do day one, there's a lot of reasons to not be concerned about Jaden Ivey. But on the flip side, to what Jeff said before, there are going to be those growing pains alongside Cade. And like, what are those going to look like? But at the same time, I think when you look at a guy like Jaden Ivey, who, he played off ball a ton in college, like this is really his first year where he was really tasked with running the show, so to speak. And I think just the fact that he has that practice, like, again, even though that like everything's going to run through Cade, it doesn't mean Cade has the ball in his hands all 24 seconds of every single shot clock. Like, Jaden Ivey's going to have to make things work too. And just imagine how much it's going to be a relief for him, where he's no longer going to be the number 1 guy on a scouting report. He might not even be a consensus number 2 guy every night on the scouting report, because Jalen Duren exists.
Yeah, and to kind of piggyback off that point, Sean, and I was going to bring that up too. I don't know if it's unfortunate. I wouldn't say that, because I don't think it'll be an issue moving forward as time goes on, obviously. But it is kind of crazy to think about Cade's first season. He pretty much dominated the ball, but rightfully so. Like in Jaden Ivey's rookie year, just kind of by circumstances, he ended up dominating the ball. So now with the first year these two guys are going to play together, hopefully for an entire season, it's like all they know. And I'm not saying it'll be all they know, because like you said, Jaden Ivey played off ball in college. Cade is an unselfish player. He can play off ball as well. Those guys are going to be able to play together, but that is the most important thing you're watching this season, is those two guys, the cohesion, how they play with each other on the court. What's the dynamic look like? Because you saw a little flash of it, but they're different players now. Like the Ivy we saw with Cade versus, game 75 is a very different Ivy. So I'm curious. That's probably the most important storyline for Pistons fans this season.
Right.
No doubt.
And I think too, with like the system and like the schematics that, like Monty Williams brings to the table. I think last season I would have been a little more concerned of, are these guys just taking turns? Are we just playing, like iso ball, my turn, your turn, kind of like what we've seen with like teams with star players or with like multiple guards in the past. But I think, like rather like bringing in a guy like Monty Williams as your head coach, like guy who's as smart as he is, who's coached as many prolific ball handlers as he has. I mean, like the only in the mere limited time he had with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, even though they lost in the playoffs, that looked like poetry in motion at times, in like the things that he put together with Chris Paul and Devin Booker. Like there's many reasons and like many anecdotes that you can point to of Monty Williams' past to say he has the expertise to make this work. It's just going to be, it's just going to be paramount for them to, to see some success this season and to start really going to that different direction. Cause I do think, like if this is like a bottom 3, like lottery team again, like even though I don't think it's like all doom and gloom, I certainly think we'd be having a lot more questions than we are right now.
Mm-hmm. And to kind of go off that point about Monty Williams too, people forget Devin Booker, and I've been watching him really for most of his career, if not all his career, but to watch his development with Monty Williams, he was a guy that could score the basketball. But with Monty Williams, it was a guy who, was kind of thrown in, especially with Chris off the court, into that James Harden role where he's a scorer, but he's also the best playmaker on the floor at times. So, and it turned Devin into an entirely better player. He played winning basketball. So if there's anybody that can speak to these guys, it's Monty Williams. Not to mention back in the day with Chris Paul. So he goes back with guards, no doubt about it.
Yeah, 100%. Like again, we might be bullish on this roster and the young talent that, that's in house. But I mean, again, the reason why is because the last time, Cade freaking Cunningham was on the court, he was going out there putting on caliber games that were up there against the stars he was facing. I mean, if you want to go back on League Pass and watch him battle Giannis, battle Steph, battle some of the best, like Trae Young, like some of the best in the league from earlier this season, you can. And like the crazy thing is, again, he was doing all that without a healthy leg, without a jump shot. And like, to me, it's not even a conversation of whether or not Cade Cunningham's jump shot is going to be better this season. I mean, even the footage we saw, I mean, the form was never a problem with Cade. Like the shot was never like actually bad. It was always just a little off, just needed a little more lift. And, the type of lift that could be affected by a stress fracture in your shin.
Right.
Oh, Troy, we can't hear you.
I was going to say, we expect that to be healed. And we're looking forward to having some great Cade Cunningham basketball this year.
It's not even like drinking the Kool-Aid either. Like the over-under is 27.5.
Right.
Like what? If you do not think it's over, then I would love to hear why. But like, it's hard not to think like this team can win 30 games at the minimum.
Right.
Like that is I think a very fair take given the injuries and them without Cade and winning 17.
Well, you know what's really depressing, Jeff? Like their over under is 27.5. Let's say they win 27 games. That's still a 10-game jump from last year.
Yeah. Right.
As depressing as that is, like that's still a jump from where we were.
Yeah. I just remember so I got a crazy stat. So the second to last game we won against the Pacers in Detroit, we run an 11-game losing streak. And then our last win of the year was like also against the Pacers, but before that was an 11-game losing streak. So we look at all those losses, even towards the end there. I mean, there were some winnable games, guys.
Oh, yeah.
Just to put that into perspective of truly how many games we lost in the stretches that we did.
Right. And again, there were a lot of losses by 10, 15, 20 plus points. I don't think you're going to have nearly as many of those this year. I truly think we're going to be a way more competitive team. It's not going to always show like each and every night. Like it's like there's still going to be moments where they struggle. There's still going to be moments where they look like a young team. But again, the pieces they have in place. I mean, this roster, like especially adding a guy like a Sar Thompson into the equation, it looks so much more like the Detroit Pistons than it did even 3 months ago, man. I mean, I feel like the bolt of energy and what he's going to be able to bring on the court, I think can almost help change our identity day one. So like, I'm just excited to see all the pieces together. You know, Cade Cunningham getting his confidence back, getting healthy. And again, remember, these guys, as we speak, are with Team USA Select, putting in the work, helping Team USA get ready for the FIBA World Cup, which, by the way, man, I'm so excited for that. I am so excited for some basketball. Just give me something, man, you know?
When's the dates?
It starts it's at some point in August. I think it's in a couple weeks now. Let me look it up. But all I do know is, you know, August 25th through September 10th.
Oh, that'll help us kind of crutch our way to the preseason there.
So. Yeah, that's kind of like the beginning of college football time too. Like that's going to be a really fun couple of weeks because like you said, it gets us right up to the beginning of the NFL year. By the way, Troy, thoughts and prayers. How are you feeling with Jordan Love as your quarterback?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we'll be lucky to win 7 games. I'm betting kind of the under. I think the over under 7.5, and I might have to go the under.
That's a great number. So. Like that's like a tweener. Like you're like
yeah.
I like think the realism, Troy.
We have potential. We have potential to beat all of the divisional teams at least once. We could beat the Lions once. We could beat the Vikings once. We could beat the Bears once. I'd be happy with a win against any of them. So I think we'll beat the Bears. We'll beat the Bears. I hope we can beat Lions once, and I hope we can beat Vikings once.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I love the optimism, Troy. No, I'm kidding. But I mean, guys, let's talk. Now that we're talking, now that we got off the rabbit hole of the Pistons, we got to talk a little bit about what's going on with Damian Lillard in this update.
Yeah,
with the league specifically. I mean, Adam Silver had to essentially send out a memo to the league saying, "Hey, you're under contract. Like, you can't force your way to wherever you want." And essentially saying like all this going around to teams and saying he's not going to play for you, he's not interested. It's not going to work for you in the long term. And if you do try it, there will be consequences. What were your guys' thoughts on, once you saw that? Do you think it will actually make any kind of difference? Do you think this affects Dame actually getting what he wants? Because I think at the end of the day, if stars express that they don't want to play for you, that is still a powerful tool, and I don't know how you can necessarily police that.
No, you can't. This is the problem. And I love how Adam Silver's trying to get a hold on this because players, at least, and LeBron kind of started this. I will admit that, but it's the player empowerment era, which fair, but at the same time, for Damian Lillard and his agent, regardless of what's being reported, you don't think agents are telling teams in privacy, hey, man, Damian Lillard's not interested. Whether it's reported or not, I don't think that you can't police that. It's not going to happen. Now, I would tend to kind of side with the players on that. If you're Damian Lillard and, I'm, let's just say the Chicago Bulls or whoever, and I'm trying to get Damian Lillard and he tells me, hey, I don't want to play for your franchise, I'm actually okay with that. I would much rather be aware rather than giving up assets for a guy who's going to leave after a year or 2 years or want out or be unhappy or not be the same player that I traded for. I don't think that's crazy. And although, Adam, I get it, it's a power struggle between him and the players. I don't really hate Damian Lillard for that. And I think if I'm a team, if I'm a GM, I would tend to be like, hey, be honest with me. I'm not going to trade for you if you don't want to be here.
I think it's valid to be upfront with a team if you don't have interest. Especially like a smaller market team, if a team like let's say the Hornets, for whatever reason, we're going all in, we're pushing in our chips to go get Damian Lillard, let's go. And if he was like, hey guys, love the enthusiasm, please no. I think there's a situation like that where it's serviceable for the team. You're trying to do them a favor. Where it becomes a problem is when you don't give any leeway for a other possible destination. Because when you give a trade request, and you only give one destination, one possible location.
Yeah.
I understand that, you know, like that on your end, your ultimate concern is your career and your longevity and winning a title and your legacy and being where you want to be. And yes, like there is like a relatively good, like a not bad trade package, like on the side of Miami, but like put yourself in Portland's shoes. Like as like even you have a guy in Scoot that you love, you're still not 100% sure he's going to get Dame. That's a once in 20 to 30 year player for a franchise like that. And now you're just saying, hey, after signing an extension last season, hey, I want out now, and I only want to go to one team. Like you know, like from a team, especially like, you know, like imagine just imagine like if like 20 years ago, like Grant Hill was to the Pistons, like, hey, I want out. You can only trade me to one team. You like literally nowhere else. Sorry, you can't trade me to Orlando to get Ben Wallace. Nope, I want to go to Phoenix. You know what I mean? Like that's where that's where it gets murky. Like granted, the Trailblazers had time to prepare for this. This is a hole that they dug themselves. And, you know, like it is like there are a lot of things that they could have done better, not put themselves in this situation. But as great of a player as Dame is, as much as, you know, like we want to see him go where he wants to go and go where he can like compete, he did also sign a contract.
Yeah.
And there are situations, I might add, where I think he can still be extremely competitive and help the Blazers get some pieces in return. Like I don't think if he went to Utah, I don't think it'd be the end of the world.
Yeah. No, the one team option I think is the problem here. And Sean, you totally addressed that of giving one destination and one destination only, because then again, that puts you as a franchise having to scramble and maybe not getting the best deal as you want. And that's not fair to your business. And I know you're right. Portland dug themselves in this hole, but it's such a business league, and rightfully so, you know, rightfully so. But I do think looking at even a Kawhi Leonard, right, going to Toronto, I don't think Toronto was his first choice, but he made it work. He made it work with a championship, right? And I'm not saying that's the destiny of every player, every star who gets traded to a team that they don't want to. But I guess where I'm getting at is you may not like a situation at first, and this is my optimism speaking,
right,
but you can grow into a situation. And a good GM who maybe knows that your new acquired player doesn't want to be there, you take that as motivation to make them want to stay there by putting pieces around them. Right. So I do think getting traded to a team you don't want to at first, it can be a blessing in disguise.
Well, even then, it can also even almost make Miami more likely if you give other destinations, because at that point, Miami will actually negotiate. At that point, they'll have a reason to come to the table, because you know what's going on in Portland right now, guys? They're playing chicken with Pat Riley, the GOAT of playing chicken. This guy isn't going to do anything out of desperation. They just dragged a team of corpses to the freaking NBA Finals. You know what I mean? Like they have Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo. They are the team that finds a way.
Right.
And so when you know, and it is publicly known that Dame wants to go there and only there, and you're really the only team that they're negotiating with, like, yeah, you could possibly throw 3 or 4 teams into the deal to make it more enticing, to make it, you know, to make the deal more likely. But like, think of like if you're Pat Riley right now, the only reason you want to get this done immediately is to say you have Dame and you can get him into training camp. But like, if you're Pat Riley, why wouldn't you wait this out and see if you can give up as little as humanly possible when there is no competition you're dealing with, when there isn't another bidder?
Yeah, and that's why there's so many different angles to this. Like, and I that's why, you know, it's tough. Like, I get it from the Trailblazers perspective, because again, Damian Lillard signed that contract, if you're the Portland Trailblazers, you're trying to be set up for the future, the best. You're trying to take the best deals. So I get that when essentially Damian handicaps you to one team, but also there's that other part where if you're the Trailblazers and you're already, a smaller market team, a team that, has been pretty much memed over Damian Lillard's career because they never really built a winner around him. But it's also Damian staying there too long. So I think they both deserve fault at this. But if you're the Trailblazers, I don't know if I want to send a message, right, to future players that you could acquire through free agency or through trade or guys you draft that, hey, we take care of our own. Like they do financially. They took care of Damian, but playing this type of game where it's like, no, we're going to trade you to whoever we see fit. Like to bring up Kawhi Leonard, although he went to Toronto and had success, him and the Spurs relationship like that was already pretty much at a end there. They just said, you know what, we're trading. I don't know if it's a good message. The Spurs could afford that PR hit because it's the Spurs, but can the Trailblazers afford that PR hit for the future? I don't know.
Well, and here's the difficult thing about it too, Jeff, is you're right. You don't want to get that reputation amongst the players of not taking care of them and not like putting their best interests at the front. Like at the same time, when has there ever been the guy in free agency that was like, well, you know what? Portland did give Damian Lillard that trade request back in 2023. I'm going to go ahead and sign there because they did right by it. You know what I mean? The tricky thing for teams is like, you want to be in the goodwill of players. You want to be known for taking care of them, even if you know that those moves aren't probably going to net you positive things in the future. So like, again, I think for franchises, this is like kind of like a lesson of really the only way to prevent these things is you really have to be preventative at all times. You really have to be like forward thinking in your roster construction and making sure that you're putting something together that, that shows the star player that you're building around, that there's a plan, that there is a roadmap, that there actually is something that you're going towards. Because I think that's what happened with Dame is it got to a point where it's like, hey, what are we doing here? And there were just too many wasted years, too many wasted trips, like not enough risks being taken at the right times. Like there's definitely it's one of those situations where it's unfortunate because we've seen in the league time and time again, the only way that players really get what they want is when they make the situation uncomfortable. If that is really the only way this stuff happens, guaranteed. I mean, you look at Jimmy Butler a couple of years ago coming into training camp. Minnesota didn't want to trade him at all. Then literally after a couple training camp sessions, it was literally within the first 10 games he was in Philly. Like James Harden, he said he's been living in the comfort zone for too long. Time to get uncomfortable. He's going to be willing to make things uncomfortable in Philly, and that could expedite that process too, right? Yeah. And you know what? And as much as we love Dame, as much as he loves Portland, as much as he wanted to win for the Trailblazers, what is he doing? Starting to make things a little uncomfortable the way that he can, and that's the thing is Dame is such a nice guy. Him being this way isn't nearly as doesn't look nearly as bad as James Harden. It's not nearly as black and white on our end of all right, you're just quitting on the team, right? There's a lot of nuance to it, 100%.
Right. And this is the first time he's been in a situation even remotely like this in his career. So,
right.
And even James Harden, I mean, kind of got what he wanted. I mean, he went to Brooklyn. So at the time, so it's hard. I hate it because I'm all for players and I love play. If you can have any type of leverage as a player, I'm all for it because you see guys like DeMar get flipped and traded for no reason. But then they ended up with a championship. So there's so many angles to this. There's a lot of blame to go around, I think.
I mean, at the end of the day, you want the players to have as many options and as much, to their disposal as possible. You want the players to do what's best for them.
Right.
But on the other side of things, in order to keep parity, in order to ensure long-term health of the league, you do need precautions and things in place to where this doesn't happen all the time.
And that's fair.
Because when you do have the threat of teams, of agents calling teams and just saying, hey, he's not going to play for then at what point, when can a deal ever get done? You know what I mean?
Especially in the age of collective bargain agreement, right? Because that adds a different element to it of what you can get in return.
Right. Exactly. Which again, there's just so many things with trade clause. Like that's a whole other rabbit hole. Like the fact that Bradley Beal's the only guy in the league without a trade clause, with a no trade clause, and could actually choose where his destination is. That's a whole other crazy thing in itself. And I could possibly see over the next few years, I could possibly see that starting to get back into the bargaining like table for players. I could see players saying, "Hey, I'm fine with not getting a supermax, but give me a no trade clause," because the power in that is so tangible. I mean, we saw it with Bradley Beal. He literally got to choose who he was traded for, where he was traded to. Like that's crazy. And I mean, the fact that Dame is almost trying to do the same without that and essentially tells you the power the players have nowadays. Like, is it overcorrecting a little too much? Maybe. But again, I mean, like, we'd rather have those guys have too much power than the owners, right?
Right. And at least with that, the Bradley Beal deal, you ended up getting Mikal Bridges, who could be a future All-Star, and you got Cam Johnson and multiple firsts. So, like, from the Portland Trailblazers perspective, Miami, it's like, Tyler Hero, and I don't. It's not the same package that Brooklyn got. So, it is a different situation. So, I understand it for the Suns,
right,
or for the Nets, excuse me.
Right. Now, guys, one last topic for today's podcast. It actually is a segment from the Taco About It podcast, which had Stanley Johnson on it about a couple weeks ago, and in particular, he was asked, like what his thoughts were about, being called a bust in the NBA. It's something that, obviously is an interesting conversation. Like anytime a player's asked about this, especially when they don't live up to the potential. And in particular with a guy like Stanley Johnson, who did show so much potential in promise at the beginning of his career. He did give an interesting response. But I think in the same light, I think it gave a lot of light into why he didn't work in the league. But we'll go ahead and watch this clip, and then we'll talk about it after.
What would you say to someone that says Stanley Johnson is a bust?
I would say to the Pistons, I think I could have been better. I truly believe that. A bust? I don't know, right? Like, I'm sorry that you guys traded me for a player who never played. Bust means you didn't try. Bust means like you didn't do shit. A bust is quitting to me. Was I a bust? Meaning, did I do my expectation for the Pistons? Hell no. And I'm not okay with that. Meaning, like, I want to fix that too. But I did my best. Like I tried. You know what I'm saying? And to say like, a bust is not trying. Like, understand. Like my first year, I didn't have to show up my first year. I didn't have to be at the first training camp. My mom died 15 days before that training camp started. I didn't have to be there at all. Let's be honest. So, like, I gave my heart and soul and tried my best. Yes, I was dumb. Yes, I made mistakes. But a bust, you call me a bust, then we're going to have a long line of bust in this bitch.
And first of all, that last statement, if we're calling him a bust, and we have a lot of busts in this bitch, yes, we do. This is the NBA. This is the best league in the world. Not every draft pick works out. In fact, the vast majority of them are misses. So there are a long line of busts up in this bitch. But also, guys, I think the other piece of it as well is like, there's the part in there and like, yeah, like I Stanley as a guy, I don't want to give the analysis on him as a person. Like going through and losing your mom right before the start of your first training camp. Like I can only imagine the difficulty and the toll that puts on you as a person and how that like affects your ability to focus on basketball. But at the same light, his rookie year was his best season. So like, what about like the off season after that? Like, what about and for me with Stanley, it's always come back to like in his time in Detroit, at least to me, it always came back to, okay, but what about basketball? Because a lot of times with Stanley, I think he was so excited about the things that the NBA brought to him off the court. Yeah. Like the things that, like the wealth that he had. And, Stanley's a really well-dressed guy. He has a lot of interest in a lot of other areas, but at the same time, like he had to be flat out told in Toronto, you are bad at basketball. Like, you are a bad basketball player. Like that was told to him like almost day one in Toronto. And like, you know, like when you're saying I tried my best and you have teams going, but did you? Like to me, like that's kind of like, you know, to me, it's a little indicative of why Stanley didn't work, and it kind of gets into the psyche of that a little bit. But Jeff, Troy, I'd love to know your thoughts.
Well, I'll just start by going back and taking a little journey back to the 2015 draft, shall we? And we should bring up guys that we could assume tried, right? Just in that top 10, right? You had Karl Anthony Towns, who, you know, even to this point, I'm sure he tried, but he worked out. D'Angelo Russell, for a number 2 overall pick, it is what it is. Maybe not ideal, but he is a serviceable NBA player. Jahlil Okafor, Porzingis, Mario Hezonja, Willie Cauley-Stein, who actually, you know, still is, you know, having a cup of coffee in the NBA. He's still there. Emmanuel Mudiay. Remember Emmanuel Mudiay?
Yeah.
He was a serviceable player. And then, you know, things didn't work out for Emmanuel Mudiay. Would we be safe to say that Emmanuel Mudiay tried? I mean, I would say that. I think he tried. Now, this is just how the NBA is, Stanley. Although Stanley, and he was always, at least in his rookie season, he was a fan favorite and somebody that I liked just revisiting. But the problem is, man never shot 40% from the field in his career with Detroit, period. Like, he was never the player that at least you projected him to be. So is he a bust? Yes. But maybe, you know, that topic for someone like Stanley, I don't know what that feels like. I know there's a lot of pressure. He's been hearing the noise throughout his entire career. So maybe he's just gotten to the point where he's just talked himself out of it. But yeah, there are a lot of busts. And unfortunately for Stanley to be the 8th overall selection, he is a bust. Like, that's just how this works, especially when a guy like Tyus Jones falls all the way to 24. Like, I think Tyus Jones, for whatever reason, no matter what he was drafted, he still worked out. So I don't know. Just saying because I tried is not a good enough reason. It's not.
Well, you know, again, like, it kind of gets back to what do you define as a bust? You know, he talked about how, you know, to me, a bust is a guy that doesn't try. A bust is a guy that quits. I don't think that's true. One of the biggest busts in the league, like in league history, is Greg Oden. The guy who, like, coming into the league, like, it wasn't like he wasn't trying. It wasn't like he didn't want to be out there. Like, yeah, like there were questions about like he maybe didn't love the game as much as he wanted a number 1 overall pick to. But like in the same breath, like, you can't name many prospects who came over and just didn't try. Like Darko, like, you could probably make that argument. The guy had, like, dealt with alcohol issues and, you know, like identity stuff coming over to the league. Like, there are, like, you know, guys like Kwame Brown, you could definitely maybe question, like, did he put the most into like the work to maximize his potential and his body of work and his athleticism? But like the guys like Stanley Johnson, it was like, all right, like when you regress on the one end of the court that was actually like your selling point and your strong spot, like throughout your time in the league, it's like when you're regressing after your rookie season, how does it not look like you're not doing your best? How does it not look like you're not trying?
Well,
from the outside looking in, like how does it not?
Well, the other part of that too, and Troy, I'll let you go. I just want to add this. It doesn't help that a guy like Devin Booker was taking 5 spots after him. Like that, that always makes it worse. Like for Killian Hayes, Killian Hayes tries. He's still labeled a bust, but it doesn't help that Tyrese Halliburton, unfortunately, just made his way a couple picks past it is what it is. Like, I think that's part of it as well. It's not like you look back at that 2015 draft and say, man, like Stanley was one of the better selections. Like, no, it matters who else was taken in your draft class. And unfortunately for Stanley, Michigan native Devin Booker fell a couple spots past him. So it doesn't help either.
And even beyond Devin Booker, guys like Miles Turner too. Troy, like,
another
you
one.
Know, like not necessarily like superstars. Like there were some guys who could have contributed beyond a couple years for the Pistons.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, looking at that team, I think even one thing I will give Stanley is his role might have been a lot different than, I guess, a Darko or a Kwame or Greg Oden as far as more minutes, more touches. But that's because I think the Pistons organization believed in him and maybe wanted to refuse to maybe was in denial a little bit of him being a bust. I think they really wanted him to be succeeding. They wanted to give him more touches. And I guess stat wise, I'm a stat guy. He didn't quite have major bust numbers, but he certainly didn't have star numbers or even longevity. This guy's a part of our franchise numbers. Jeff, you mentioned under 40% from three. I mean, when you're a wing like
from
that,
the field, from the
field. Oh, that's even worse, right? Under 40% from the field. You certainly can't be the franchise player. And I'm not sure if they ever wanted him to be that franchise player, but they certainly wanted, I think originally when they drafted him, they wanted him to be a longevity guy. So when you don't fit that expectation, when you kind of had the tools, I would say Stanley had the tools to fit that expectation of he could have been a longevity guy.
To be a good NBA player. Not
right.
even
he
like
had the tools to be a good NBA player.
He had the tools to be a really good NBA player.
And I guess if I were on that podcast, Sean, I would ask Stanley, okay, so what did you do in Detroit or even in your NBA career that makes you not a bust? And, he says he defines bust as someone who didn't try. I tried. I don't really like that definition. I want to know how you contributed to an NBA roster, if it's Detroit or the other teams that you played for, to make you not a bust, because I just don't see any arguments there for him being a quote unquote great role player, serviceable NBA player, besides, I guess, the little stint with the Lakers there, but that doesn't count.
I mean, guys, just to give a little perspective here. Player A, 6.2 points per game, 3.1 rebounds, 1.5 assists, 39% from the field. Player B, 8.4 points, 3 rebounds, 5.3 assists, 37% from the field. Not comparatively different, but like you would say the second player is definitely better than the first one, right?
Yeah,
Player A was Stanley Johnson, player B is Killian Hayes. So at the end of the day, you have a guy over his career that was somehow offensively worse than Killian Hayes.
Right, when he didn't have to be. He really didn't have to be.
Right. A guy who had lower volumes of having the ball in his hands somehow has a worse shooting percentage and overall stats than a guy in Killian Hayes. And granted, that wasn't even Stanley's calling card, but like when you regressed on the defensive end, that was your calling card, and you were really trying to build yourself up on the offensive end. Like, remember when he was playing shooting guard in his second season? It was, like they were trying to run some more offense through him, and he was trying to be a more offensive-minded player. I think Stanley's just one of the, he's just a sample of like one of those guys where, he comes to the league, you have all the reason to believe that he can succeed and that like he can be great. But like the difference between guys in this league, we talk about it all the time. It is not massive. It looks like massive gaps on the court, but in reality, the difference between a guy on the end of the bench and a superstar, as far as talent goes, is very minuscule. It comes down to the things in between your head. It comes down to the mental fortitude, the mental toughness, the wherewithal to make the right play at the right time, but also like to have that mental toughness to get through some stuff. Right. And, you have a guy like Stanley, and yes, like he went through a lot of obstacles, during his time in the league. A lot of guys did too. And, the reality of it is, it's just that's just going to be the case. There's guys that you believe in. There's guys you think you can do things that just don't work. And in particular with Stanley, I mean, unfortunately, there are things you can point at and say, he definitely could have been better in this area. He definitely could have done more. And again, we weren't in the building. I don't like to call out and say like a guy wasn't trying, that's not what I'm out here to do at all. But it is hard to believe that he tried his best when he got worse as his career went on. That just that doesn't correlate. Right.
Yep. Right. The other guy, I guess, to me personally, that, speaking of has all the physical tools but didn't pan out, Sekou Doumbouya was like the most recent example, because I'm like 15, Sekou Doumbouya like physically has it all together, but like you said, Sean, that's what separates guys that are Sekou Doumbouya versus guys that are drafted in the middle of that lottery, like a Giannis, who similar physical build, but Giannis mentally is just another animal.
Right.
He's determined.
Right. And it is tricky too with guys like Sekou as well. Like, he's a guy who picked up basketball late in his life. I know we have, players in the league, I know Anthony Edwards. What's that?
Joel Embiid picked up a basketball later too.
Yeah. Joel Embiid picked up basketball. Yeah, 100%. But there are a ton of guys who have that talent or have that athletic, freakness. But again, even Sekou, another guy who like, let's be honest, like a lot of his time, like I followed him on Instagram. I saw him on Snapchat. Like this guy was vibing. He was having the time of his life living the NBA life, you know? And it's like, again, like those are just the little, like the very little minuscule things that are the difference between you getting minutes in this league, having a roster spot long-term, and like being known as a great player as like a bust, right? I mean, like it's a heck of a league, man. And I think as the years go by too, with I think as scouting gets better, as technology gets better, I think we'll just see less and less busts as the years go on. But like, there is going to be a player that like over the last couple of years that we rated super highly that is going to fall flat. Like that is just going to happen.
Because it happens every draft. It may not be it may not be one guy in your top 5, but normally
I mean, what?
In a good NBA draft, Sean, any NBA draft, at least one of the guys in the top 10 is going to be a bust. Maybe not a Darko, Kwame, Greg Oden bust, but a bust that's not going to contribute the way that we thought they would.
Yeah, it could be like a Michael Kidd-Gilchrist bust where they come in and it's like, this guy's like good, but like 2nd overall pick in the draft, good? God, no. You know what I mean? Like,
Even for a guy here locally like a Lindsey Hunter who was drafted super high but still contributed to winning, excelled at his role in the NBA. Like you guys still find ways. It's just I guess that's what separates guys like Lindsey Hunter who can still make an impact and teams still want him versus somebody that kind of falls out of the league even though they were drafted high and had all the physical potential, but then they end up retiring early or just not being signed.
And I think conversely, why, like, and again, he hasn't started his NBA career yet, so it's kind of unfair to make those comparisons. But like, you look at a guy like Asar Thompson, right? And like I've seen a lot of comparisons to Stanley Johnson ever since he's come into Detroit, and like I think from a prospect and like what you're hoping, like what they bring to the team, I think you see a lot of similarities there. I think the difference is what you see with Asar day one that you just never saw with Stanley is just a sheer hunger to be a better basketball player. And even though he's coming in, he didn't get to play in college. He didn't get to have that experience. He did get to be a professional basketball player for a couple of years. He got to learn how to handle having a ton of money for a couple of years. Like he's coming in, like this isn't new to him. You know what I mean? Like the having to deal with, dealing with having all the time in the world to work on your game, having to, manage some of those things with, like within your life. Like, yeah, there'll still be things you'll have to learn, but I just think you look at how confident they are in the person coming in day one. Like that's the big thing that Detroit's really nailed. Like that Troy Weaver really nails with picking and selecting his prospects is they don't just select a player, they select a person.
Right. And I think that exactly, and not just the person that they selected, but who's doing the selecting, who's in this corner. Troy Weaver, Dwayne Casey, Monty Williams. I trust those guys around a hardworking guy like Asar more than I did a Stan Van, more than I did a Stefanski.
And that's a great point too, is ultimately Stan, like as I think if Stanley Johnson, if he even had Dwayne Casey like earlier in his career, like I think we could be looking at a little bit of a different trajectory. Sometimes it can just be, do they have the right voice in their ear in their rookie or sophomore season? And the Pistons, like that Detroit team was lacking in leadership, was lacking in those types of voices. So it's not like it's entirely a shock. It's not, but at the same time, like it doesn't, doesn't exonify like the fault for either side, right? Like there's definitely fault to go around, but at the end of the day, like you just got to move forward. Like I definitely hope Stanley can still have some form of basketball career. I hope, like, whether even if it's not in the NBA, I hope he can still go overseas and really succeed and still live out some form of that potential. But I mean, again, you can lead a horse to water, you can get him to drink. And I think with Stanley, it's like, all right, well, he definitely recognizes that he definitely recognizes he wasn't great. He definitely recognizes he could have done a lot more, but in the same light, he tried his best. I think again, that's just where it shows like, all right, still some growing there to do. Right.
Yeah.
So, but guys, speaking of a lot of growing to do, this channel has a lot of growing to do. And you can do that by hitting the subscribe button down below. Each and every week from Half Court, we talk all things NBA and Detroit basketball, especially when the season's ramping up. We are going to be ramping up here. It's going to be awesome. So be sure you are here for that. But also, be sure you're following my guys, Jeff and Troy, my boy Jeff at Jeff Iafrady. Check him out Monday through Friday on the Morning Woodward Show as well. Talking to guys like Tom Izzo, just, just gracing us with his presence as well. Pretty boy Jeff Iafrady. It's what he does.
Now I'm in the alley. Now I'm
Iafrady.
Yeah. But also follow Troy at Troy Sergey 44 because we love him too. You can even follow me at Sean Half Court if you're even feeling a little generous. I mean, I know that I'm asking for a lot at this point, so maybe I should stop. But this was from Half Court. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we will catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you're subscribed.